Okay, today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim daf Tet Zayin. There's a study guide, so definitely recommended to look at the study guide. We're going to start with the Mishna that we ended with yesterday. Okay, shevua she'eni yashen she'eni medaber she'eni mehalech. Okay, so now somebody takes an oath that they're not going to sleep, they're not going to speak, they're not going to walk. This we saw was just like there was a Mishna on Yud and Amabet, which we spent some time trying to figure out yesterday, which was Konam she'eni yashen she'eni medaber she'eni mehalech, and then we said Harei zeh b'bal yachel dvaro. If you remember, we had two explanations about what that meant, and we said that it was either right. Dirabanan, Ravina said that really, and I want you to remember this because we're going to go back to this today, which is that Ravina says that this neder is really not a neder on a Torah level, right? Because you can't do a neder on a davar she'ein bo mamash, but midirabanan, we're going to say it's a neder anyway. Bal yachel dvaro meant, well, you still can't go against what you said. So that's one way to understand it. The other, if you remember, was that we had a whole different explanation about exactly what case it was referring to. Konam shena, konam inai b'shena, etc. We're not going to get into that. But basically what the Mishnah is doing, and we're going to see this also going forward, the Mishnah is comparing the same language in a neder and in a shevua. Okay? So, shevua she'eni yashen she'eni medaber she'eni mehalech is a real shevua, and that's because we already learned a shevua applies even if it's davar she'ein bo mamash, right? On sleep, on walking, on talking, anything like that. The second part of the Mishnah goes back to neder. Korban lo ochalach, right? Korban is not a lashon of a shevua, but we're now going to see three languages of neder that don't work. So again, this is a repeat of what we did at the end of yesterday's class, but important to start because we're going to talk about it right now. Korban lo ochalacha. Ha korban she'ochalacha or lo korban lo ochalacha mutar. So let's go through each one. Korban lo ochalacha. That means will be forbidden to me of a korban what I won't eat from you. Well, that's not referring to what I will eat from you. So it's not referring to anything really. That's not a vow. It has to apply to something. And here you're saying to what it's not applying to. Ha korban she'ochalacha we already saw is ha korban is you're basically saying in the life of the animal, and that's not a language of a vow. And lo korban lo ochalacha would only be forbidden if you say what it means, not a sacrifice what I won't eat from you, but it will be a sacrifice what I do eat from you. And to do that, you'd have to say michlal avatasha me'ahen, that we can infer from the negative the positive. But Rabbi Meir doesn't hold that way, and in a minute we're going to see this Mishnah is clearly Rabbi Meir, and that's going to explain why this is mutar. So the Gemara says, Mani matniti, Rabbi Meir, who's this Mishnah? It must be Rabbi Meir. Why is it Rabbi Meir? And I'm going to pull up the study guide right now so we can see the comparison here. So in our Mishnah, we have, right, korban lo ochalacha mutar, a korban she'ochalacha mutar, lo korban lo ochalacha mutar. They're going to compare it to the Mishnah on Daf Yud Gimel. The Mishnah on Daf Yud Gimel said, korban sheni ochelecha, Rabbi Meir forbade, Rabbi Yehuda forbidden. Ha korban ki korban or korban she'ochalacha is forbidden. Because, if you remember, what did we say here? This is Rabbi Meir. Because Rabbi Yehuda's whole approach was, right, Rabbi Meir's whole thing is you can't infer the positive from the negative. Rabbi Yehuda's whole thing is you have to use ki. If you don't use like a korban, then you're not comparing it to a korban, and then that's not a vow. So, ha korban and korban would actually not be a vow. So, this line, ha korban, ki korban, korban, is Rabbi Meir and not Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, and then soon we'll get to the last line, which is la korban lo ochalacha. If you remember, Rabbi Meir forbade. We said, why is that? Isn't this michlal avatasha me'ahen? To which we explained it a little bit differently, but we'll get back to that in a minute. That was the sugya we saw about 5 times already. So the Gemara says, Mani mandinitim Rabbi Meir, Di'i Rabbi Yehuda, lo shane le korban, lo shane le ha korban. Our Mishnah, if you notice, uses the language ha korban she'ochalacha would be mutar. Now, if it's Rabbi Yehuda, it's not only ha korban, it's even just simply korban she'ochalacha, which is usually the basic way of making a vow, at least according to Rabbi Meir. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's not a vow at all. So if korban itself is not a vow, and then obviously ha-korban, the Mishnah should have just given the simple case of korban she'ochal lecha mutal. Since it didn't, the Mishnah is clearly not Rabbi Yehuda. To which the Gemara says, but wait, ema seifa la korban le'ochal lecha mutal, v'hatzanan la korban le'ochal lecha Rabbi Meir osel. But the end of our Mishnah says lo korban le'ochal lecha, and we've already said many times, lo korban is the same as la korban, because la korban is a combination of lo and korban. So if our Mishnah says lo korban le'ochal lecha is permitted, that goes against Rabbi Meir in the Mishnah in Yud Gimel, which said la korban le'ochal lecha Rabbi Meir osel. Assuming, again, we know already we don't assume this, but generally they assume la korban means lo korban, and then it should be forbidden and not permitted according to Rabbi Meir. But what do they say? Right? And we explain that Mishnah as saying, when you say la korban le'ochal lecha, what you're really saying is, it will be for a korban and therefore I won't eat it. So why in our Mishnah do we not say that lo korban le'ochal lecha also means that? To which they say the obvious answer, which is lo kashya. Hadamar la lekorban, hadamar lo lekorban, de lo ave korban kamal. Right, that was with a shva, with two dots under the lamed. Lekorban, it will be a korban, and therefore I won't eat it. And that's what Rabbi Meir forbids. But lo korban with a patach, right, where it says lo, right, in Aramaic it's la korban le'ochal lecha, that would be, it's not, right, that it's not a korban, and that would be permitted. Okay, so that's how we basically explain this Mishnah according to Rabbi Meir. Now, actually I'm going to show you now the second part of this chart. On the left side of this chart, I brought the next Mishnah. Shevua le'ochal lecha, ha-shevua she'ochal lecha, lo shevua le'ochal lecha. Notice it's the exact same language. The chart helps you see it. Korban le'ochal lecha, shevua le'ochal lecha. Ha-korban she'ochal lecha, ha-shevua she'ochal lecha. Lo korban le'ochal lecha, lo shevua le'ochal lecha. All these cases in the next Mishnah are asul. Another comparison of something that applies for an oath, but doesn't apply for a neder, for a vow. Okay, so let's go through the cases. I swear I won't eat anything of yours. Well, that makes sense. That's the language of an oath. It's going to be forbidden. Ha-shevua she'ochal lecha. This is a bit of a strange one. The Gemara is going to have some issues with this. Ha-shevua, I swear that I will eat from you. Forbidden. What's forbidden is forbidden for me to eat from you. Why? It sounds like you're swearing that I will eat from you. To which the Gemara is going to say, we're obviously assuming when I said it, I meant really, I swear that I'm not eating from you, and therefore you're forbidden to eat from me. How we get to that, we're going to have to figure it out. We're going to have two approaches to that. Lo shevua le'ochal lecha, it's not a shevua, what I won't eat from you, which basically means, what? Michla lavat tashomei ahen. It is a shevua, what I will eat from you, which again, shevua she'ochal lecha, we already said means I won't eat from you, which means it's going to be forbidden. Now, wait a minute. How can we say Bichlal lavat tashomei ahen? So the Ran says, if you look in the Ran on Shevua le'ochal lecha, ha-shevua le'ochal lecha, much further down though in that Ran, the Ran says, he basically distinguishes, and he says, even though Rabbi Meir holds that we hold Michlal lavat tashomei ahen, we don't hold Michlal lavat tashomei ahen, he distinguishes. Now where do we learn it all from? The Bnei Gad and the Bnei Reuven. Remember the condition that they stipulated. Now, basically, what he's going to say, I won't actually read I won't read it inside, but what he says is, when it comes to monetary things, their issue is a monetary issue. When it comes to monetary things, we hold it's similar to Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, and you need to word it exactly as you word it. You can't infer from the negative the positive. Right? You have to say, if we do this, then this, and if we don't do that, then this will happen. So here we have to say, I vow. Right? The vow has to be very clear. This is what is forbidden to me, and not inferred from what's not forbidden to me. Now I know what is forbidden to me. But in a vow and a neder, since it applies to an object, says the Ran, then it becomes a financial thing. It's a mamonot issue because it applies to an object, whereas a shevua applies to a person, not to an object. What's forbidden to me, that already is not considered a monetary issue, and therefore he explains, that's how he explains the distinction, why even if you don't hold Michlal lavat tashomei ahen and neder, you would actually hold it by an oath. Okay, so that's how we understand that case, the last one. Now, as I said, the Gemara is going to raise a question on that middle line. Michlal de ha-shevua she'ochalach de lo achil namashma. right? It sounds like when you say shevua she'ochalach, it means I won't eat from you. So, number one, that's a problem in and of itself, but that's not the way the Gemara asked the question. But they could have theoretically said, how could you say she'ochalach is shelo ochalach, right? It's the opposite. But in order to prove the issue and highlight it, they say, Uriminu, this contradicts another explicit Mishnah, and a Mishnah in Shevuot. Shevuot, shtayin she'en arba. There's two types of oaths, two categories of oaths, which really come out to four different types of oaths, because each category has two oaths. Simple math. She'ochal v'shelo ochal, she'achalti v'shelo achalti. There's two types. What are the two types? Future and past. I can take an oath on what I will do or won't do. That's she'ochal or shelo ochal. Now notice here, she'ochal is what I will do. Shelo ochal is what I won't do. So it's already obvious from here that she'ochal is different from shelo ochal, and it means something different. Otherwise, it wouldn't be four different types of oaths. It would be two oaths that are two, let's say, right? And then I can also take an oath about the past. Let's say I'm on a diet, and you come to me and ask me, what did I eat today? And I say, I swear I didn't eat, what I wasn't supposed to eat. So I can do a shevua shelo ochal or a shevua she'achalti. I could say, I swear I did eat this. Okay? So those are past tense. Those really don't interest us. But what does the Gemara say? Mida ka'amal, and you're missing a word here. She'ochal v'shelo ochal, she'achalti v'shelo achalti. The Bach adds in the word she'ochal. It's not just I'm adding it, but it's obvious that it's trying to tell you. Since it says what I will eat and what I won't eat, and those are two different oaths, it's clear, michlal de she'ochalach de achilna mashma. When I say she'ochalach, I mean that I will eat and not that I won't eat. So how does our Mishnah understand it and say it's forbidden for me to eat if I said I swear that I will eat? It should be, right? It's a valid vow, but I should actually eat. So, Amar Abaye, she'ochel. So I told you we're going to have two answers, Abaye and Rav Ashi. And then the Gemara is going to say, why doesn't Abaye hold by Rav Ashi? Why doesn't Rav Ashi like Abaye's answer? Amar Abaye, she'ochel shtei l'shanot mashma. When I say the word, when I swear I'm going to eat, I could mean one or the other. I could mean I really am swearing I'm going to eat. Or I could mean it, maybe the word is cynically or something along those lines. Or I really mean I swear I'm not going to eat, but I just say it in the language of I'm going to eat. So what would be the examples? Hayu mesarvim bo le'echol. Let's say you're trying to push me to eat in your house. V'amar achilna. I say, okay, I will. But you're still bugging me about it. Maybe you don't trust me. V'tu, and then, shevua she'ochal. I say, I swear I'm going to eat. Stop bothering me. Clearly, I mean, I swear I'm going to eat. Aval amal, what if I said, lo achilna? You come to me and you say, I want you to eat in my house, and you're bothering me, pestering me about it. And I say, I don't want to eat in your house. Vitu amar, and then, you get me upset enough that I say, shevua she'ochal, I swear I'm going to eat, which I really mean, right, the opposite. What I mean is, leave me alone, like, I swear what? You think I swear I'm going to eat? I really mean, I am definitely not eating in your house, right? It's clear from the context, dilo achilna kamar, that what I meant was, I don't plan to eat. So according to Abaye, what you'd have to say is, that when the Mishnah says shevua she'ochalach, it would be asul. It would depend on the context. You would have to look. If it was the context of the first scenario, then it would obviously be that I would want to eat. If it was the context of the second scenario, then it would be obvious that I meant I didn't want to eat. And then I wouldn't be allowed to eat. So it would depend on the context. Rav Ashi amal, she'ochal de shevua she'i ochal kamal. He basically does an emending of the text. Don't read the text in its simple way. We know this many times. If they come and they say, shevua she'ochalach doesn't really mean shevua she'ochalach, change the wording. It should say, shevua she'i ochalach. Okay, what's e? The term efshar. Efshar means I can. Efshar means I cannot. E always means I will not. So the wording, the Mishnah should read, shevua she'i ochalacha. It's missing an aleph yud there. Okay? So that's what he says. So the Gemara says, in kem pshita. Well, if that's the case, that you said, shevua she'i ochalacha, that's no different from shevua lo ochalacha, which was just said a second before. So why do you need to add that case? To which the Gemara answers, ma'u detema mekam lishanahu de'it kale kamashmala. think about the words. If I say the words, I take an oath. Okay, if I say shevua lo ochalach, it's pretty clear I meant lo ochalach. Okay, again, this is Rav Ashi, not the other one, which we're going to get to and see that even maybe lo ochalach maybe it could mean yes, I will eat. But lo ochal is clear. That's what I said in words. Lo ochal. But if I say shevua she'i ochalach, what if I stuttered a little bit? Shevua she'i ochalach, right? I could theoretically, since it's the same letter that starts the word ochal, and E is not so much different, although it is pronounced a little differently, but theoretically you might think that I could come later and claim, let's say I said shevua she'i ochalach, which is shevua I won't eat from you, and then I go and I eat. And they try to say, oh, you took an oath that you weren't going to eat. You went against your oath, now you're liable. And I say, what are you talking about? I was just stuttering, I meant she'ochalach. So comes Rav Ashi, and the way he reads the Mishna is, shevua she'i ochalach is asur. You can't claim, oh, I was just stuttering, and that's not really what I meant. That's not a valid excuse. So that's the way Rav Ashi reads the Mishnah. So the first is going to be very easy. Abaye lo amartan ke Rav Ashi, why not? Lo katane she'ochal, because that's not what it says in the Mishnah. Abaye goes by the simple transmission of the Mishnah was shevua she'ochal, and not shevua she'lo ochal. And that's why you had to come up with, well, sometimes people might say things in a way where they didn't really mean, they really meant the opposite. Okay. Again, this is all about when people speak, what do they mean, right? In other words, I saw, Becky, you were asking, why didn't you just say it like you meant it? But the fact is, there's people who speak in opposite language sometimes, it's just the way people speak. And Nedarim, you have to, again, try to figure out what was in the mind of the person. So if I claim I was just being sarcastic, maybe that's valid. And I could claim I was being sarcastic. That's not really what I meant. And you can see from the context, and then actually it would be either an oath or it would be an oath depending on what direction you're going to go in. But right, Rav Ashi would say here, Abaye would say here, if I said I made an oath that I'm going to eat and I really meant that I'm not going to eat, that would be a valid oath and I'd be forbidden to eat. So people are sarcastic, and because people speak sarcastically, therefore, you have to take that into consideration when understanding these languages. So now we have to figure out Rav Ashi, nade mintam d'Abaye. Here's again another use of language that's different than in Nedarim than in most Masechtot. Language doesn't appear too much in other places. Nade means he wandered off from the answer of Abaye. Okay, first of all, Rav Ashi came later, so it doesn't make sense to say he wandered off. Okay, it's just a language they don't usually use. But meaning he decided to go a different way. Why didn't he agree with Abaye? Because he said, Kasavar, now note the Mishnah. The Mishnah started with shevua lo ochalach, which is an oath, and then it said shevua she'ochalach. And ochalach we assume means lo ochalach, or at least could mean lo ochalach. But comes Rav Ashi and he says, if you think that ochalach could mean lo ochalach, well, lo ochalach could also mean ochalach, okay? If you're going to talk about sarcasm, well, not eating could also sometimes be explained as I will eat. So let's see how. So, and therefore he says, what, you're going to take this, everything could mean the opposite. And then where are you going with this? So he says, Hayuma sarvim bo le'echol. Here's the example. You're bothering me to eat again. You're pestering me. V'amar lo achilna, with a question mark. You think I'm not going to eat by you? You think I'm not going to eat by you that you keep bugging me about this? V'amar nami shevua. And then you even say, leave me alone. I'm taking an oath. Now, ben shel ochal, it doesn't matter what the oath says. If you're bothering me to eat and I say, what, you think I'm not going to eat? And I say, I swear I'm not going to eat. Or, I swear I'm going to eat. It could be when I say, I swear I'm not going to eat. It really means, you think I'd swear that I'm not going to eat? Is that what? You think I've sworn that I'm not going to eat? In other words, it could be understood the opposite of the literal meaning. And therefore, haden, right, in that case, it would be the achilna mashma damar. If you're bothering me to eat, and I'm saying, what, you think I'm not going to eat? You think I'm not going to eat? And then I swear about it, it doesn't matter what language I use. It's clear that I'm swearing that I am going to eat. So, therefore, he says, it can also be that I swore I'm not going to eat, and I really mean I'm not going to eat. So that also is open to possibilities in Rav Ashi and Abaye. You didn't start saying that. So therefore, he says, Elatana paska she'ochal de'achilna mashma v'she'lo lo ochal mashma. So Rav Ashi comes along and says, no. The Tana was clearly being decisive. Ochal means you're going to eat. Lo ochal means you're not going to eat. And that's why Rav Ashi says it must be that shevua she'ochalach must be read as she'i ochalach, that you won't eat. Because the Mishnah, even though theoretically this could be mad and that could be mad, right? This could go forever. So he basically says the Mishnah is obviously talking about the basic case, not the very sarcastic person who's using it in the opposite language. It obviously means the simple, clear language, and therefore you'd have to change the text to say ochal and not ochal. Next Mishnah. Ze chomer b'shevua mi b'nedarim, v'chomer b'nedarim mi b'shvuot. So the first line of the Mishnah refers back, and the next line of the Mishnah refers forward. So the first line says, this that we just saw is a stringency of Shevuot, of oaths, as opposed to neder. Okay, we assume right now that it's referring to the previous Mishnah, because again, I'll bring up the sheet again. If you look at the first chart on the sheet, we have korban lo ochalach, ha korban she'ochalach, lo korban lo ochalach, and in the middle of the chart is all permitted. Those are languages of neder. But the second Mishnah said, shevua lo ochalach, ha shevua she'ochalach, lo shevua lo ochalach, just fill in instead of korban. Shevua is going to be all forbidden. So that looks like, although the Gemara is going to have a problem with that, which we'll get to in a minute, that looks like this Mishnah that says, this is where Shevuot are more stringent than vows. And now it's going to say, and we're going to now tell you where are vows more stringent than oaths. So, Ketzad, how do you have Chomer b'neder mi b'shvuot? In what way are vows more stringent? Amar konam sukkah shani oseh, lulav shani notel. The sukkah is konam to me, you vow. The sukkah is konam that I won't make one. Or a lulav shani notel. The lulav is forbidden to me that I won't pick it up and do the mitzvah of the arba'at hamimim. Or tefillin shani meniach. The tefillin is forbidden to me. I vow against the tefillin that I won't put it on. B'nedarim asur b'shvuot mutal. If I use the language of a neder, that will be forbidden to me. It's crazy to think. If I vow, it becomes, I vow not to do a mitzvah. If I do that mitzvah, I might fulfill the mitzvah, but I've gone against, I've transgressed a negative commandment of lo yachel dvaro, don't desecrate your word. You have to keep your word, so you actually can't do the mitzvah in order to keep your word. But b'shvuot mutar she'ein nishba'in lavor ala mitzvot. Okay, but Sheva, what you're asking is exactly the question of the Gemara, which is, how can you possibly take a neder against something it says in the Torah, right? Just like we say, the shevua can't go against what it says in the Torah. First of all, the shevua, we're mushba v'omei mehar sina. We've already seen that, right? We're already sworn that we have to do it, so we can't swear not to do it. Because it's something that we've already sworn we have to do, so we can't undo that by swearing we're not going to do it. So there's no chalut of the shevua. The shevua doesn't have anywhere to go. The neder, we're going to see, actually can apply. And once it applies, then I'm stuck. And it's not that theoretically you can vow anytime you want not to do a mitzvah, but if you did, the vow applies, which we'll see why soon. And since the vow applies, therefore, you actually can't do the mitzvah. It's a crazy thing. Get it this week, which is already up on our site, is a more in-depth about this topic, which is a fascinating topic. And what's this idea? And a big question the Tosfot asks about the Gemara going forward, like what we're going to see in the Gemara now, but a bit of a difficulty with, we're going to have two answers to this question, how this works by Neder, Abaye and Rava, which really are kind of one and the same, just with a minor variation. Anyway, Rabbi Meir Shimoni goes much more in depth into it, and it's worth listening to. So now the Gemara asks first, before we get to this interesting topic, it first goes off on the first line, which I already told you we're going to have a bit of an issue with. Chomer b'shvuot mi b'neder. Now if I say, in this case, shevua is more stringent than neder, michlal, from here you can infer de nederhu. It must be referring to a case where there is a vow. It's just that the laws of Shevuot are more strict than the laws of neder in this case. Now, if there's no vow at all, like the examples that we brought, right, where it was korban, lo ochalach, or all those, it's not a vow at all, well then you can't say this is a stringency of Shevuot as opposed to neders when there's no neder at all. Stringent makes it sound like there's a range. There's this, which is X amount of stringent, and this is X plus 4, or something, or X times 2. Okay? But if the Mishna, the Gemara says, V'ha mutar katani, if it's referring back to the previous Mishnah, the previous two Mishnayot, which basically said, a neder, or shvua in this language is forbidden. A neder in this language is permitted. Permitted sounds like there's no neder at all. So it doesn't make sense to say this is a stringency. This is basically, this is and this isn't. This isn't even an neder. To which the Gemara says, a seifa di idach bava katani. What they must be referring to is the seifa of the previous Mishnah, which said, shevua she'eni yashen, she'eni medaber, she'eni ma'alech asur. Ze chomer b'shvuot mi b'nedarim. So go back to the Mishnah before that, right? We had the neder shani yashan, right? Look at the language. It said on Daf Yudalad Amud Konam shani yashen, shani medaber, shani ma'alech. What did we say? Hareze bebal yachel dvaro. Now, you have to understand this Gemara the way Ravina understood it, and in fact, the Ram points out that we must hold like Ravina based on this Gemara here, which is, what did Ravina say there? What does it mean, Hareze bebal yachel dvaro? If you say a neder in the language of, it is a neder upon me that I will not sleep, right? Instead of saying it has to be my eyes that they sleep, etc., but you say she'eni Hashem, which is al davar she'en bo mamash. Remember, we said a neder doesn't apply to something that's not tangible. So how could this be a neder? What does it mean? Hareze bebal yachel dvaro. Ravina said it's usher by rabbinic law. It's not a neder on a Torah level, but the rabbis forbade it. That's what the Mishnah is referring to. Shevua shelo eshan, shevua shelo edaber. That is doraita. That's much more strict than a neder in that language. A neder in that language will only be rabbinic. And now it makes perfect sense. Okay? That's what the Mishnah must be referring to. Now we move to the mitzvah. Chomer b'nedarim mi b'shvuot ketzad. Rav Kahana matne, Amar Rav Gidal Amar Rav, v'Rav Yumi matne, Amar Rav Gidal Amar Shmuel. Again, another strange use of a word here. In Nedarim, where we use it differently than it's normally used. Rav Kahana matne, Amar Rav Gidal Amar Rav. That means his version was that Rav Gidal said it in the name of Rav. Usually matne would be his version of a braita. This is his version of something an Amora said using the language matne, which is weird because matne is always a language of a Tanaitic source. Anyway, the point is, this is very easy. This is Rav Kahana said that Rav Gidal said in the name of Rav. Rav Yumi said it, that Rav Gidal said it in the name of Shmuel. Anyway, now we're going to see what they said. Minayin she'ein nishba'in lavor ala mitzvot. How do we know that you can't take an oath against what? Against a mitzvah. Talmud Lomar lo yachel dvaro, because the pasuk about oaths says you cannot desecrate your word. Now, dvaro means your word. Dvaro lo yachel. You can't desecrate your word when it's your own word that you said. Aval mechelu lechaftei shamayim. But if it was about something of God's word, meaning if it was about a mitzvah, then it's a problem. Then you actually are allowed to desecrate it because it's a mitzvah. Okay? This is similar when we learn Kriyat Shema. It says, when are you supposed to say Kriyat Shema, if you remember? Belechtecha baderech, when you're on your own path, for the sake of your own sake. But if you're on the path for a mitzvah, right, you're on the way walking toward a mitzvah, you're exempt from Shema. Because lecha, right, it's your own, it's referring to, not God's. Okay, so if you're doing God's mitzvah, then you don't have to. So now, before we go on, we have to really read this pasuk and what are they referring to? Because lo yachel dvaro, if you remember, also applies to a neder. So it's a bit confusing. So the pasuk reads like this, Bamidbar chapter 30, verse 3. Ish ki yidor neder laHashem. A man who makes a vow to God, hishavah shevua, or takes an oath. Now, it doesn't say to God here. In a few minutes, the Gemara is going to assume, and this is why as I read it, I want to tell you this, that the word to God must apply to both sections. It's basically, if you make a neder to God, or you make an oath, presumably also to God, le'esur isar nafsho, to forbid something to yourself, lo yachel dvaro. You cannot desecrate your word. You have to do everything you say. So right now we're focusing on lo yachel dvaro. So now there's a bit of a problem, because we're saying dvaro means your own word and not God's word, which means if you said an oath against what God said, it wouldn't be valid. But theoretically, that should apply to neder as well. Neder's in the same verse, and lo yachel dvaro applies to neder as well. So the Gemara doesn't exactly ask it in this way, but that's basically what they mean. So Mishna neder. So why is neder any different? Really, because they don't say this explicitly, but because neder also says dvaro in the pasuk. So they say it must be because dichtiv ish ki yidor neder laHashem lo yachel dvaro. Because it says the word laHashem, it includes even when it relates to things that relate to God. However, as I told you before, the Gemara is going to say that doesn't work either because shevua nami haktiv. Ishavah shevua laHashem. Now this is why it's critical to look at the pasuk inside. Because if you read just the Gemara, it seems like the pasuk says, O Yishava Shevua LaHashem. Now the pasuk doesn't say O Yishava Shevua LaHashem. The pasuk says O Yishava Shevua, but the LaHashem they understand as referring to both sections, which makes sense. A lot of times there's a pasuk where it starts off with a more elaborate line. The next line is smaller, and that modifier obviously modifies both sections. Okay, so they're basically saying we're in the middle of a question now. Also by Shevuot it says LaHashem, and then it says Lo Yachel Dvaro. So if you're going to say it's because it says LaHashem by Neder, that comes to say even against a mitzvah, your Neder will be valid, well, the same thing should apply to Shevuot. So therefore, they basically say, Amar Abaye, there's a difference between Neder and Shevuot. Why is that? Hada Amal, Hana'at Sukat Alai. Hada Amal, Shevuah Shelo Ehene Min HaSukkah. It's all about the language. Okay? Now Tosfot questions this a little bit, and this is what Gefet's about. It makes it sound like only if you use this language will the neder be applicable. Not everybody understands it that way. Some people understand it's the nature of a neder. And this makes sense with what we've been talking about all along. The nature of a neder, what are you forbidding? You're forbidding the benefit of the sukkah upon you. Now that's not against what it says in the Torah. That's on the sukkah. The sukkah doesn't have any sort of obligation, right? So you're saying the benefit of the sukkah is forbidden to me, which in the end means that you're not going to be able to do the mitzvah. But the neder can apply because the neder is not on yourself. The whole issue of the mitzvah is a commandment upon me. So if I say, I will not, I swear I will not, and this is again, Chefza Gavra distinction that we've talked about from day one about neder and shevua. A vow is on an object. An oath is on yourself. So if I say, I will not benefit from a sukkah, then I can't say that because I am commanded to benefit from a sukkah. It's not mine to forbid myself to do that kind of thing. I can't. That goes against my mushba v'omei mehar sinai. I've already taken an oath to yes, enjoy the sukkah. So Abaye says that's the difference. If I say on atzukat alai, the neder can kick in because it's not on me, and therefore I'm basically I can fulfill. I can't fulfill the mitzvah if I said this neder. Now, I see you're saying, what about if the sukkah, right, it's this sukkah. But in this case, they seem to talk about sukkah in general. The hana'ah of any sukkah is forbidden to me. Because obviously that would be the obvious way to get around this, which is, so not this sukkah, go find another one. Not this lulav, go find another one. But they seem to me, or any lulav, basically. So, Rava has a bit of a problem with Abaye. His approach is going to be the same, which is this basic distinction between neder and shevua, chefza gavra, object versus person. But Rava says there's something wrong with the language he used. I'm a Rava, and this is something we learned a bunch of times already. V'chi mitzvot lehenot nitnu. If I forbid the benefit I'm going to enjoy from sitting in the sukkah upon me, I can still keep the mitzvah. Because keeping the mitzvah does not mean I'm benefiting. Mitzvot we're not given to benefit from. It's not like you're supposed to sit in the sukkah because it's nice and fun to sit in a sukkah. It might be, but that's not the idea of the mitzvah. The mitzvah is because God commanded you. So I can say, fine, the hana'ah I won't do, but I will do the technical mitzvah and I'll sit in the sukkah. So therefore, Rava says, that's not what we're referring to. El amar Rava, had amar yeshivat sukkah alai. He changes the wording a little. What he means is, you have to say it's the sitting in the sukkah is forbidden to me. And again, because it's relating to the sukkah, and the action of sitting in the sukkah, that's what's going to be forbidden, and then it will apply. But, right, hadamar shvua shelo eshev basukkah. Okay, and that's different from I will not sit in the sukkah. I will not sit in the sukkah. I can't say that. That goes against the Torah. Now we're going to just end with this kind of end mid-sentence because it goes too much into tomorrow's daf. But the Gemara is now going to say so again. The assumption is shevua doesn't apply because it says the word dvaro. Right? Lo yachel dvaro, which is going to apply only to shevua and not to neder because of all the reasons we just said, because of chefza gavra distinction. But even though they're both it's in the same pasuk. But basically, the Gemara is going to say, wait a minute. You're going to learn it from dvaro, lo yachel dvaro, that it's only your own words, but that you have to keep to. But if it's God's words, then you don't have to keep the oath. Mehatam nafkale. Don't we learn it from a different source? And now they're going to quote it. Tanya, as it says in the Braita, Yachol nishba l'kayim et ha-mitzvah v'lo bitel yachol yeh chayav. And I'm really going to end mid-sentence here because I don't want to go too far into tomorrow's daf. But our daf ends with this question of the Braita. You might have thought that you can take an oath to not do a mitzvah, and then let's say you do the mitzvah, yachol, right, lo bitel, meaning you did not do it, okay, maybe you would be liable for what's called a shvuat bitoy. Again, a shvuat bitoy is what we saw before, Shevuot Shtein Shein Arba, I will eat, okay, I will not eat. So, if I didn't eat, let's say I will not eat, and then I did eat, I would have to bring a korban shevua. Okay, I went against my shevua. So now they're saying you might have thought that if I went against my shevua and didn't do the mitzvah, and did do the mitzvah, I swore I wouldn't do the mitzvah, and then I did it anyway, maybe I'll be liable to korban. Now they're going to explain a different verse for where we get it from, that's not the case. So that would be a proof then for Einish be'in lo l'kayem mitzvah, right? You can't take an oath not to keep a mitzvah, and not from our source of Dvaro. So that's going to be the question we're going to start with tomorrow. Why learn it from Dvaro when we have this Breita that learns it from somewhere else? That's it for today, and we will pick up from here tomorrow's stuff. Have a great day, everyone.